Hey guys, my name is Jason. I'm the founder of Distress Loan Advisors. If you want to book time with me, there is a link below, or you can just go to jasontees.com and you can access my online calendar. It looks like I'm in a closet. I'm actually just relegated to the upstairs because my wife is working from home. Therefore, I've been banished. All right, today I want to talk about EIDL and our friends on Reddit. While Reddit is a great place for communities to gather, um, I can't tell you the number of times that I've spoken to people who have gotten incorrect information off of Reddit. And um, I know people are, nervous and they're well meaning. And so when they get a little bit of information, they feel eager to share it. Um, but also, I find that it creates a lot of anxiety and panic in people who think certain things are true and they turn out not to be. So I just want to go through some of the common myths that I see all the time, or I guess hear all the time from people who say, oh, somebody on Reddit said, insert thing here. Um, so what do we got? First, oh, Gracie's here. Say hi to Gracie. So the first thing that I hear is, is the SBA going to foreclose on my house? And the answer is probably not, because the SBA at this point, to my knowledge, is not pursuing anyone's personal residence just because they defaulted on an EIDL loan. It's important to remember that it's unlikely that you pledged your home to begin with. The collateral requirement was if you borrowed over $500,000, that you would have to pledge real estate, but they were very specific that it needed to be commercial real estate. And I believe it even said in the loan documents that if you lived at the property, even if it was commercial, you did not have to pledge it. So the likelihood that you pledged your home is very low, and the likelihood that the SBA will ever pursue your home is also very low. Gracie, are you kidding me? Now, theoretically, the way they could go after your home would be if they decided to sue people. And as I've detailed before, the only people, I'm going to switch this way so she's not in your faces. The only way that they would be able to go after your home would be, if you didn't pledge it, they would have to sue you, get a judgment, and then put a judgment lien on the house. First of all, not every state allows that. Second of all, the SBA is not suing people other than people that committed fraud. And so essentially what that means is if you're, and I use this example all the time, if you're Jason's Pizzeria and you defaulted on your, $550,000 loan just to be safe, I didn't pledge my home to begin with. And if I use the money to pay my landlord or for payroll or, for any acceptable use, that's not fraud. What they're really going after with people who committed fraud are, I bought cryptocurrency, I bought a beach house, I bought a Lamborghini, stuff like that. So, in order for them to go after your house, they would have to start suing people first, which they're not doing. And even if they sued, it's not a foregone conclusion that they would go after your house. I mean, it's possible they just get a judgment and, try to levy a bank account or try to garnish wages or something like that. So it's not an automatic that they would go after the house anyway. So to address, again, what people see on Reddit is, are they going to go after your house? I would say it's highly unlikely based on everything that I know today. What else do people talk about on Reddit that I hear from people that makes me shake my head? Just the general idea that, well, the government can do what they want, so no one knows what's going to happen here. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to say. To say no one knows what is going to happen. Like, well, duh, yeah, no, we can't predict the future, but we certainly have an idea based on past performance. And primarily, I'm referring to the treasury offset program when loans are defaulted on. So I've been doing this for a long time. 15 years. I started working for myself in early 2009. And one thing that's been consistent is if we're unable to settle a loan and the borrower can't pay it off, once the bank does its thing, they always close their file. the customer always gets a 60-day letter from the SBA, and then it always gets referred to the Treasury. So the referral to the Treasury it's been their process for a very long time. So again, when people say no one knows what they're going to do, I don't think that's necessarily true, because I've watched them do this for a very long time. So if you don't pay, in all likelihood, the file will be referred to the Treasury. You'll be placed in the Treasury offset program, and it's likely that you won't be sued. So we have a pretty good idea. And the reason I think there's value to knowing that is that you don't have to make panic decisions, especially when they'll often go talk to attorneys who, they give them the doom and gloom scenario without having any practical experience. And while it certainly has some value to understand, in the world of possibilities, what's the worst that could happen, but I also think there's value in understanding the likelihood of the worst case scenario as opposed to the likelihood of some other scenario. And that's what I spend a lot of time talking to people about when I do consultations about, given their specific circumstances, what I think the most likely outcome is. And I think that's valuable to people who come to me in a little bit of a panic, anxious, losing sleep, saying, I don't want to lose my house. I don't want to wake up one day and have them clean out my bank account, stuff like that. So I'm able to just sort of talk people through the likely scenario versus, talking about every possible bad thing that could happen. What else do people not understand on Reddit? Personal liability in general seems to be a hot topic. And it gets a little confusing, and I'm not even going to attempt to get into the weeds here, but essentially people don't understand the difference between recourse lending and non-recourse lending, specifically when we're talking about collateral and when we're talking about personal guarantees. It gets particularly confusing for people who borrow less than 200,000 because somebody will say, I'm a sole proprietor, but I didn't give a personal guarantee, so I'm not liable, right? And the answer to that is a sole proprietor doesn't need to give a personal guarantee because they are the borrower. But that is something that people are very confused by a lot of the time. Just as a reminder, if you borrowed over $200,000, they did require a personal guarantee. If you borrowed under and you borrowed through some sort of legal entity, then they did not require a personal guarantee. And so that's an important distinction. But even in those cases, I spend a lot of time explaining to people the implications of having a personal guarantee versus not. Beyond that, I'm trying to think, is there anything else that people really consistently get wrong on Reddit? It's the sale of collateral. In my view, it's not worth it to sell collateral without the SBA's approval, because most of the time, or almost all of the time, that money needs to go to the SBA. The only way you get to keep some of that money in your pocket would be if you paid the loan off in full and there was some money left over. Other than that, if your business closes and you sell your business assets, they're going to want that money, which means if you can't get a hold of the SBA, and I know that's a thing, it's a big problem, but if you can't get an answer from them fast enough and your buyer walks away, my recommendation is don't go ahead and sell the stuff anyway, because doing that it gets them angry. I've seen it where the SBA has referred people over to the Inspector General because they sold collateral without the SBA's okay. And in that circumstance, my client had tried to get permission, couldn't get an answer, and then just made a judgment call and said, you know what, I'm going to sell these vans. She sold them for like $5,000 or $10,000, and the person at the other end got all angry and said, we're going to refer this to the Inspector General, and that's fraud. And so in my mind, it's not worth it because that money doesn't go in your pocket anyway. If the SBA is not going to be able to respond to you quick enough, then I would just abandon it and say, I can't get a buyer because I can't get approval quick enough from you guys. And so, I'm just going to abandon or dispose of. So if you want to come get it, come get it. And as I've detailed many times before, the SBA will not come to get your stuff. All right, I'm approaching 10 minutes. I don't want to talk too long, but that is my thoughts on Reddit and the things that people tend to get wrong when they're in the various subreddits that cover EIDL loans. Thank you for listening. I know I'm not posting as frequently as I used to, just because there's not a whole lot of new info. no OIC. They're still only offering that 50% deferment for another 6 months. It's not the hardship accommodation. They're calling it something else now. But other than that, there is no help. And so if you're thinking you're going to call the SBA and plead your case because you're a special circumstance where things aren't going well for your business, but it's not your fault, it will fall on deaf ears, just so you know. That's it. Thanks for checking in. Again, if you want to schedule time with me, there is a link below, or you can go to jasontees.com, or you just Google Distress Loan Advisors and it'll come right up. All right, we'll see you on the next one.